welcome to another finely seasoned, dare I say, sea salt encrusted episode of Midlife Krisis.
Artisanally encrusted.
And artisanally encrusted like your favorite lobster that's been caramelized for, that would be a horrible thing. Dipping that lobster in sugar and then frying it.
I know where we're going after this.
Yeah. Not to Red Lobster, because they're all gone. Big Shrimp took them down.
Bubba Gump.
Yeah, exactly. Bubba Gump and every mall location took them down. So, all right, Guy. What we're doing today is we're going to be talking a little bit of shop on that new Elden Ring DLC that came out as we record last weekend.
I love this, Brian.
Okay.
I love this because this show's Midlife Krisis, and we do a lot of talking about old video games.
Absolutely.
And we do Let's Plays, and I haven't played a lot of these things.
Sure.
And finally, we're doing something new and current that I can be more involved with.
Absolutely.
More up to date on, something
Right.
that's hot spanking off the press.
Something that you've got a ton of we'll say expertise in, if I could use a term.
Definitely, but I will defer to you.
Okay, perfect
For this part of it.
Now I appreciate that. So, I will beat you up a little bit now. So this game that came out in 2021, I think, 2022. I have gone on several records to say that it is by far the best video game that has come out on these consoles. Might be the best video game that I've played in 10 to 15 years. But at least for sure, it's the best video game that you can play on a current console, including PC.
And even you've said it's the only game that feels like it's a next gen game compared to.
And I'll say this, and this is kind of for me, this is blasphemy. No other way to call it, but I think this game is better than maybe any Nintendo game that's come out.
Oh my God, Brian! I can't believe how you're selling me on this. Jesus.
I will say that I think this game is better. It's certain, in my opinion, and you can see the influence of Breath of the Wild on this thing, but I think it's better than Breath of the Wild. It's definitely better than Tears of the Kingdom. Like, there's no two ways about that one. That's like, it should be, it's a significant thing for me to say, because as we all know here, I am nothing if not a devout Nintendo apologist and adult man fanboy.
Oh, I know. I was part of the text conversation when you were trying to defend the Luigi's Mansion 2 decision making to me. That was fun.
Well, look, all right, you can't. A port is a port, and I think that game is worth $60. Okay, but that's not here nor there. So we're going to talk about the new Elden Ring DLC. We're going to talk a little bit about that game in general, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Souls stuff because. Okay. So let's do a quick little rundown. Sure. So of the whole series, I've played the original Demon Souls on PS3 when it first came out on 2009. I at the time was following it because there was a lot of hype on various video game websites at the time that had me very excited for this. The first thing that drew me in is the art style. Like, it is basically like a living, breathing, interactive death metal album cover. And that was super appealing to me. I already was a big fan of From Software at this point because I played some of the Armored Core games. There's a game on PS2 called Kuon, Kuon, that is one of my all-time favorite horror games I've ever played. And that was a From Soft game. So, like, I knew who they were and what they were all about, so that was also intriguing to me. But it was all about the weird asynchronous online stuff that really kind of drew me in. The fact that you could go into someone's game and basically ruin it for them sounded beyond appealing to me.
I just love that.
So I started there as the series started, and then I played the first Dark Souls again on PS3. I didn't play Dark Souls 2 immediately. I played the re-release when it came out on PS4.
Did you ruin lives there too?
Maybe we can break that down when we get a little bit more further about the series, but you can't ruin lives like you can in the original PS3, or not even 360, it was PS3 exclusive. In that game, and I'll just set it up now, and why, for fans of the Souls stuff, it is like still kind of considered like, I don't want to say it's the best game because it's not, that's Elden Ring, but it's like the most mean-spirited of the games. Because number one, it's super hard. The PS5 remaster is nowhere near as hard. But they had this element where you could turn into a red phantom, invade someone's world. Yeah. And if you, as the invading player, if you lost, nothing happens to you. You just go back to your world and it's fine. Yeah. If you kill the other player in that game, they lose an entire level. And that could be anywhere from, 4 hours of progress up to like, if they're way late in the game, like 10 to 15 hours of progress. And you're just taking it from them. Just taking it away from them. So they retooled that and made it so the stakes were a lot less there, which probably makes sense. But in terms of the fun of spoiling someone's weekend, it wasn't so good.
So for any of our viewers out there, please go watch our Let's Play episode where Brian played the game Kind Words. If you would like to see his views on ruining other people's weekends. And
hot dogs are yummy. You always start with I hate everything about you, but I started off with saying hot dogs are yummy, and I stand by that fact.
Who knew that Kind Words and Demon's Souls had so much in common?
I didn't. I would never have guessed. I never would have guessed that in a million years. So then, between me playing Dark Souls 2 was Bloodborne, which people still talk about as like something that needs to be desperately updated on PS5.
Yeah. I came over. We had a play date shortly after you got Bloodborne. Mm-hmm. I had not heard of Souls-likes. I had not heard of Bloodborne, and you were trying to explain it to me, and trying to be nice to your friend, and say like, hey, there's this basically new genre of game, and this is the new hotness version of that. And I looked at it, and I was like, it's pretty cool, but I don't see the word Warcraft anywhere, so I don't know. I don't know what you want from me.
There's no green dudes in this, man. I don't know. I can't build a gate with a green dude. I don't know if I'm going to play this.
What's the point?
So Bloodborne, I still say is like gameplay wise is the best like playing of the series because of, like the combat is so good. Like you in one hand you have a gun, in the other hand you have a sword, and you defensively use your gun, which is just genius. And I think a lot of people stand by that Bloodborne is the most fun playing of all the games. But in terms of scope and scale, and then when you try to compare that to Elden Ring, like you can't even have that conversation. But I totally skipped out on. I have not played Dark Souls 3 to date, and I've not played Sekiro to date. So those are the two of the whole series that I haven't played, and I feel dumb about that. Feel bad about that, but it is what it is. Fast forward to Elden Ring. I was in a pretty good place when that game was coming out. I had my PS5, and just like Bloodborne, I bought a PS4 to play Bloodborne, and I kind of just that was like a totally intentional thing. But the PS5 I wanted to get because it's a PS5, and then it just so happened that Elden Ring was not only coming out to PS5, but it was at the time it played the best. Like it had the best performance of all the systems, including PC, at the time. So I was like, well, here we go. Let's party. And then I harangued and harassed you because I wanted to play that game multiplayer with you because you can. And I know you bought it day one. I know it's sitting there at home on your cute little shelf. And I remember messaging you multiple times, being like, hey, dude, this game is so goddamn good. When are we playing together? And then it just never happened. And to date, you have done no Elden Ringing at all, right? You haven't even fired it up, right?
I did fire it up. About a week ago, I made a character.
Okay. That's progress. That, my friend, is progress.
I did do that. And then it like launches you into the world. And then I was like, it's getting pretty late.
It's getting pretty late. I better work on this platinum in this other game.
That might be true.
Yeah. I think
when Elden Ring first came out, it was Horizon Forbidden West. And that was the choice. And because I'm not sure if you know this about me, Brian, I'm a contrarian. And whenever the world is going one way, I just have to go the other way.
You have to play the other really popular game. So that's okay. Horizon, I want to touch on that too because it's kind of important. The first game came out against Breath of the Wild. So obviously I didn't play it.
Within days, yeah.
And then the second game came out
against Elden
Ring, so I'm not going to play it.
Within days. Yeah.
And the only Horizon anything that I've played was the VR game that came with the PSVR 2.
Yeah, which mildly disappointing.
Yeah, I think, we talked about it on our show about back in the Halcyon days of when we were excited about that device and before it was revealed that Sony would completely drop support for it. We both said like it's really cool looking, it's really immersive, but like the gameplay is kind of eh. For me, it was more than that. It was kind of the universe of what that game is set in. Like it doesn't really do a whole lot for me.
Well, that's because I think you were within that game, they're telling the micro story of just like it's a character driven thing, and the micro story of Horizon is below average. The macro story of the world of Horizon, how everything came to be, that I am super into. And the first game was my favorite game on that generation of the games that I played, and the second game was really, really fun too, and it's great. If I had it to do all over again, I probably would have played friggin' Elden Ring to just be a part of the zeitgeist of the moment with everybody else. Because you can always go back to Horizon Forbidden West.
You sure can, yeah.
And I can get that platinum anytime. But Elden Ring takes a firm commitment. And right now it's like I'm playing 6 different games at the same time and doing 60 hours for Elden Ring and now whatever the DLC that we're about to talk about is going to require. It's a very intimidating barrier to entry. Not unlike when we talked about Baldur's Gate 3 last year, and you're like, look, I've only got one of these in me a year. I sort of agree with that because of just where we're at in our lives, and I'm not sure if I've got Elden Ring in me as good as it is. But hearing you say it's better than Nintendo games, knowing what I know about you and how much you love exactly Nintendo.
And my precious moments.
It's like, Jesus Christ. Well, it's like, that's the highest praise that you could possibly give.
It's literally the highest praise I could possibly give about this video game. Like, literally. And I honestly think it deserves it. And, like, we've talked about, like, how we weigh criticism on the stuff that we play. But this is one where, and it just so happens to be a convenient argument for me, but I agree with all the 10s that this game gets because like I can't think of another game in this generation, and again even going back to the last one, like at least midway to it, I can't think of another game that has made like the feeling of progress and how rewarding it is when you finally beat that boss, like the feeling of getting ringers, having multiplayer co-op come in to help you topple a boss when you've gone. I've had it 2 ways where like I sit there and fight a boss a million times, waste all of the items that you need to use, the expendable items to like bring in players, and lose at that boss, and then finally beat that boss by myself somehow miraculously and be like, on the one hand, I feel like I graduated medical school, and yet I feel bad because I wasted all of my co-op items.
Right.
But you know, what are you gonna do? So yeah, I mean like. It is such an incredibly good game, and the thing that you're saying about like being out, like these Souls games, the experience of being there right at the beginning, like you have to, like there's no other way to do it. I mean, yes, you can. Elden Ring is a bit of an outlier because it's by far From Software's most successful game. Like it sold millions and millions and millions of copies, which to be honest with you is baffling to me. That this game, which is so brutally difficult, and the DLC even more so, got the popularity that it did. Like, it just made my world go upside down. Like I didn't know it was possible that something that's designed like this, that is niche, can break through and become this mainstream thing. I'd be interested to see how many of those players that had never played a Souls games before that jumped in with Elden Ring, how many of them actually stayed the course. I haven't even bothered to look into that, like how many people beat it or whatever.
I have a little data on this. I looked it up, and I guess to get to the DLC, you have to beat a boss.
You have to beat 2 really hard bosses.
And 30% of players had accomplished that.
Okay.
So out of however many started the game, 30% of players got at least far enough to the point where you could even play the DLC.
Okay.
So whatever that's worth.
So that's worth something. So that means that if the DLC is doing as well as it is, and it seems like it is, then that 30% of the number is a massive number. So it's 30% of multiple millions of people that did this.
Well, and maybe some other people. Like I bought the DLC. I haven't done much in the game yet. So
yeah, that's certainly. I didn't think about that. I think about when I spend my money, I use the thing that I spend money on. But there are so many people that don't. Well, it's the Steam. For 2 decades, the Steam programming that goes on, where you buy all these games on, and now I'm guilty of it too. Like whenever there's a Steam sale, I buy crap that I'm not gonna play it. Like I say, and it's.
Yeah. Although you are gonna play it one day.
Sure, Mr. Homer. Sure, I am. But anyway, back on to the game Elden Ring, and then I'll segue into the DLC. So playing Elden Ring at the beginning ruled because. The messages that are on the ground are like so helpful and most of the time accurate, and even the troll ones that say jump here and you're at the end of a cliff.
That's the first thing that happened to me in the game. I made my character and then I like walked outside and there was a thing that said jump here,
and then you did it.
I did not do it because I played Demon Souls, and I know.
Yeah, I know better. But all that stuff is really on point when you first start, and there's like this one of the main draws for me about the whole series, but in particular, it seems with Elden Ring, is like there's this like silent community of players that like you can go super like gnarly off into the weeds and like look up lore videos and read all the dozens and dozens of wikis that go deep into like the story and all this other stuff. But just playing the game, like the community of people that kind of help each other out, it's just there and no one communicates. There's like, I've never played that game with voice chat, and I have no intention to ever play that game with voice chat. And I've tried to play it multiplayer with a couple friends, and it just never works out. Like for me, it's a better experience to just play with strangers. There's something about it. Like it's like a connectedness that isn't really connected, and it kind of adds to like what it is that you're doing. Like the mystery of a Souls game, it kind of goes part and parcel with it. Yeah. So when I beat all the way through, beat the last boss, got the all the cool shit. Probably 130 hours it took me to do that.
God. And you told me, we brought this up, I think, on a recent episode. But yeah. Then just one random day, you're in our chat, and then you're like, "Hey, I just popped into Elden Ring to do something, and I found like some cave or something like that, and boom, 5 hours of new content, just like going through this new cave." That struck a chord with me. I've kind of remembered since then. And this was after you'd already poured a ton of hours into the game, and I think that it was after you thought that you were done with the game and just discovered this thing.
That's exactly right. I would pop in to Elden Ring just to get that taste, just to get a little taste.
Just to ruin somebody's weekend.
Just to ruin someone's weekend. And each time I did that, and I didn't. Once I finished that game, like I definitely felt like a huge, overwhelming sense of accomplishment. So I didn't like go back multiple times. And I've never been a PvE player a PvP player with any of the Souls games. Just because I'm not like that good at games, and these games are so skill based that if you aren't like in the upper echelon of players, like you're just gonna get murdered every single time. So that's not ever really been a thing for me. But exactly what you're saying, like I would just dip back in, run around for a little bit, find some cave that I never saw before, and then all of a sudden like half of a day goes by because I just keep finding more new stuff. There's so much content in that game. That you could theoretically, maybe 400 hours. I don't know. Like I don't know the official number of how much stuff that's there. But then this is important to say because your brain is the way that your brain is. So like, I would not recommend. I really strongly wouldn't recommend playing this as a completionist because like you're like, you have a family, sir. You've got to take care of your family. You've got responsibilities. Like. I don't want you to start using on this. So I want when you start playing, like main quest, little side quests here and there is fine. Dabbling's okay. Experimentation's okay, but like just don't lose your life to this thing because I could see it happening in a big way.
If it helps, I did not get the platinum in Demon Souls, so
okay. That does gives me a little relief. Yes,
I keep telling myself I will go back and get it.
No,
I've never uninstalled it. Yeah, so for that reason.
Well, Demon Souls is such a tight little compact unit of a game compared to Elden Ring, and the Dark Souls series for that matter. Like the big difference between all these games is Demon Souls PS3, Demon Souls PS5, and Bloodborne. And I don't know if Sekiro's like this or not because I haven't played it. But you have like a hub world that you beam back into. Yeah. And so like you beat a boss, so then a new area opens up. It's very segmented, and like you can kind of attack these things at your own pace. Mm-hmm. You do bounce around here and there, and like you have to fight this boss and then come back to that or an earlier area to advance to another one, that kind of a thing. But Elden Ring and the Souls games is you don't have that main. Well, actually in Elden Ring you have both. You have a main hub world where you do like your smithing and all that other stuff. And then you have the bonfire system. In Elden Ring, it's called the grace shit. But in Dark Souls, you unlock bonfires and you can like travel back and forth to those on your map. And there's no homeworld that you get to go back to and like feel safe. In Elden Ring, you get both of those. So you have it's like combining Demon Souls and Dark Souls, which is cool. But it's just so massive. It's so massive. It's like the biggest. And I'm sure there's Baldur's Gate maybe is probably bigger. I don't know. Like, to be honest, I don't know. But there's so much shit in Elden Ring. And then there's the underground stuff and all the caves and all the tombs. And it's just a giant game. And so now this DLC that came out last weekend, I was expecting, just based on my other dalliances with Souls games DLC, I wasn't expecting too much in terms of volume. I saw the price. It's $40.
Yeah.
So $40 is a significant buy-in.
Yeah, for a DLC for sure.
And so that made me kind of think like, well, it's either this is modern video games and everything's more expensive now, and this is going to be like, and the other thing too I should mention is I didn't read anything about it. Like I did nothing to look at it before I started playing it. I read a couple reviews after I was like 10 or 15 hours in, but I wanted to go in with as much mystery as possible.
Right.
And that was the way to do it. But so you start and there's this little square map, and I was almost disappointed. I was like, nah. I mean, this is gonna be fun. This is gonna be cool, but like this is such a dinky little square. And then I played 5 hours, 10 hours, 15, whatever it is. I beat the first major boss, and then I go to the next little map icon thing, and then it doubles in size. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And then again, same rinse and repeat, like another 10 hours, beat another major boss. Now it keeps expanding, and now it's to a point where it's like, it's not as big as the main map in Elden Ring proper, but it's like 100% worth $40. Like there's no two ways about it. I've played. I'm 30 hours in now. I've seen estimates say if you just stick to the main quest, it's about 40 hours. The way I'm playing it, I'm guessing it's probably gonna take me like 50 or 60, which for $40. That's great.
That's a full game.
It's a full ass game, and there's games that come out that are a fraction of this that are $70.
I platinumed the God of War Ragnarok in between 40 and 50 hours.
Yeah,
and that's not just a full game, but a really good game.
Right. So
if you're getting 40 good hours out of a DLC or more for $40, yeah, you're having a good time.
Big time. I'm having a good time. So
I should play it then.
You should maybe think about stopping everything that you're going to do, and play two games. Play Paper Mario.
Yeah, because you remembered the last time you said that.
Yes,
to me.
That is exactly accurate.
Yeah.
Play Elden Ring and Paper Mario, and then stop doing everything that you're doing.
I own both.
Yeah. So. See, well, half the battle is already won then. Okay, so I'm going to say a few more things about this DLC, and then we can maybe talk about like what we each think, what makes Souls games so good.
Okay.
So this DLC, I've seen it written, and this is accurate, is that, well, it's just more Elden Ring. Yes. Yes.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
That's exactly what it is. It's just more Elden Ring with new shit that you haven't seen before. There is this whole new, and I think this is kind of genius how they set this up, but they being From Software, wanted to reinstill that like everyone starts out the same kind of approach, because there's people who play these games and don't play any other games.
Yeah.
And so they could be like level like 300, 400. And like they would just kind of waltz into a DLC and like flick something like a boss, and then they die. That's not how this company makes their games. So they went in and created like this new upgrade path that it only is effective in the DLC. And there are these new items that you have to go around and find. So it's not as complicated as but you can still traditionally level up. Like that's also a part of it. But when you find these little items, and the names are escaping me, but there's only two of them. Like there's two types of these items, and you just usually find them at the end of like a long cave that you've spent like an hour or two fighting through monsters, or you'll find one at the end of a major boss. And they upgrade your offense and defense only, and then the other one upgrades like the hardiness of your horse. And your horse in this game is super important because it makes traversing this giant area like way more. God damn it, Robbie! The horse has a double jump. I mean, need I say more? The horse is essential for getting around and making this gigantic game a lot more travelable, so to speak. So I thought that was really smart that they did that, because it does keep everyone starting out like kind of at an even playing field.
Yeah, right.
The other major criticism that I just encountered yesterday as I was reading, but there's an article on IGN that talked about how like basically questioning the difficulty of this game. Like, is this too hard?
Dude, the Steam reviews are mixed.
Yes.
Because of the difficulty. They say there's also a stuttering issue. I guess I'm probably more on PC than on PlayStation. I don't know if you're experiencing that at all, but I definitely wanted to ask you about the difficulty, because these games are known to be difficult. So when I see people complaining about the difficulty, it's like, guys, you know what you're buying, right?
Yeah.
And yet, it's a DLC to Elden Ring, and it's got mixed reviews, at least in some part, if not large part, because of the difficulty.
So, yes, it is hard, and yes, it is definitely harder than Elden Ring. I thought that Elden Ring, one of the reasons why it did have a mass appeal is that they did design elements that did dial back the difficulty. Like, for example, in Elden Ring, exclusively out of the whole Soul series, if you're in an area that has, like, say you walk into a village and you kill all the enemies in this particular village, you get all of your health replenishing stuff back. Like, this red and blue crap, like ether, like, kind of floats into you like magical stardust,
right?
And you get all that stuff without having to go to a save area or any of that stuff. So then it's like all of a sudden you're ready to go into the next area without having to stop down and save or whatever. And I thought that was genius, because like it did give, especially in the early game, like these games, like you really have to fight through it. Like if you've never played a Souls game before, like they almost weed you out. Like if you can't take this type of difficulty, and the difficulty in my opinion is always very fair. Like, you know, when you well, every once in a while you'll accidentally roll off a cliff and die, and that does suck. But for the most part, especially when you're fighting enemies, and literally any little grunt enemy can kill you.
I remember that.
I'm sure you do. But for the most part, like I find the difficulty to be very fair. Like when you die, it's usually your fault, and you kind of know where you go wrong. That becomes a little bit more of a gray area when you talk about some of the boss fights. Some of the boss fights, and especially in this DLC, like they're fucking ridiculous. So, perfect example. I'm bopping around the map, and I find this crazy area that is like a bunch of rooftops and has a ton of water. And this game is not a platformer. Like, it's just not. Like, running and jumping is not the Souls series' strong point. And yet you're in this area where you have to run and jump, and like if you don't, you die, and that's it. There's no swimming. There's none of that stuff. So that happens. I lose a bunch of souls. And then eventually I bot my way around, and I figure out how to drain all the water, and it opens up a new area to explore. I go into a cave. I keep pedaling around. And then I get to this boss. And this boss is like this gnarled tree, and all the little, like a tree ant kind of a deal with like a gnarly death metal sunflower head. And there's messages that say definitely use fire on this guy, and I'm like, oh yeah, no problem. I'm a very high level sorcerer, so I have fire spells at the ready.
Okay.
And after like 10 tries, and like some of the tries are me alone, me with my Mimic Ash tier, and then me with co-op players, I die. Then there's one run where I finally get the boss down, and I was playing with a co-op ringer, and I'm like, fucking finally,
yeah.
I beat this boss. Cool. Let's see what cool item I get. And then the music dies down, and there's like, you know, real intense like orchestral boss fight stuff, and it gets all quiet, and it's all, now it's your time to breathe. And then I see the life bar go,
it's phase 2.
And yep, phase 2. And then I'm like, all right. And then I immediately go to my phone. I immediately look up this boss. I see the word optional, and I go, well, we're not going to do this one anymore. And maybe we'll come back around in like in several months or so.
What a wonderful ringing endorsement for this DLC. It's like, you too out there could experience the incredible frustration that Brian just described.
And you should. But yeah, I'll say the criticism of it being really difficult is true. But I would also say to that exactly what you said. Like, you know what you're signed up for. If you've gotten to the point where you beat Elden Ring to where you can play this DLC, like, you should be good to go.
Yeah.
You should be fine. And it's not, to me, in my opinion, it's not difficult enough to the point where where you just totally want to like uninstall it and get that kind of angry. But I will say that is a semi-valid criticism. This is really, really hard, and it's harder than the traditional mainline game. But I think that's part of the design. Like, I think they wanted it to be hard because at this point you theoretically beaten Elden Ring to death, and you're looking for another challenge.
All right, so are we going to pivot now into Souls games in general, because the difficulty part of it that's such a part of the appeal of what these games are. And I think I mentioned this on the show before, but at one point in my life, I was a video game designer, And I really appreciate what FromSoft has done with these games because it's stuff that I would have never thought of because it's so counterintuitive. When they see in Demon Souls, when you approach something and you die and the game says, fuck you, you died, so we are going to take away half of your life. You can go back and try to get your soul back.
Yeah.
But then if you don't do that, you just lose everything. And in the effort to get your soul back, you only have half as much life to actually do it. That's so counterintuitive to how almost every other company sees difficulty in video games. The player died, we need to give them a crutch. Let's remind them that they can change the difficulty. Let's give them an option to have a little health boost. Let's do something to just give them, hold their hand to make sure they can get through this part and experience the game. And FromSoft zagged when everybody else was zigging and said, no, we're going to actually punish the player. And so it's it just doesn't make any intuitive sense, except that when you're playing it, it teaches you to value your life a lot. And so when you're crawling
in a way,
through
it goes back to old school games, NES games. And the one school of thought was, okay, you can make the argument that old 8-bit and 16-bit games are very difficult because a kid's going to beat it in a weekend. And that was largely true. A lot of kids who would rent a game over the weekend would sit there and crank on that bad boy and beat it. And then you're done with it and it becomes disposable. And that's something that I think as games advanced in so many other areas, this was a thing that was kind of lost. And the Souls series brought it back. And it's exactly your point of making you have to value your health and you have to value your life and you have to think defensively and you have to be very cautious and you can't just run into a room. You have to very, very gingerly tiptoe so safely into new rooms.
As you would if you were actually immersed in this environment.
Absolutely.
And the first time I was going through Demon Souls, I just never experienced anything like that before. And so it's you get through it and then you're tiptoeing into the next room and there's this tension. I'm sweating while I'm playing. Mm-hmm. And this is just going through the levels, not even the boss fight. You don't know what's coming at you, and whatever is coming at you is potentially deadly. And the consequences of you dying are really, really significant. And you don't know if you do die, if you'll be able to get back to get your soul again. So the whole thing creates this just second by second tension. So as you're walking through, and then sometimes, again in Demon Souls, apparently in Elden Ring too, you'll discover a little hidden passage or something. And it's really interesting. It's well, what the hell's down here? But you don't know, there might be some treasure. It is a hidden passage after all. But there might be some kind of crazy ass enemy too. So now you're tiptoeing through that. So one of the things that the games do really, really well is atmosphere and the darkness of it and how dreary the world is, at least in, again, Demon Souls. And so they create this wonderful atmosphere for you to be immersed in. And then they give you this gameplay tension that makes you feel like every second that you're alive, you're in danger. And you feel great if you can make it through one part to the next part.
The sense of I've never played a video game that makes me feel so accomplished and so so happy about myself than beating a boss in any of these games. And in Elden Ring, it's magnified because the bosses are so much more epic. They've really spent a lot of time in Elden Ring to make the boss fights that much more memorable. And I really feel from Demon Souls, the boss fights in Demon Souls are great, they always have been. But there you can see a progression from Demon Souls to Dark Souls to Elden Ring, and Bloodborne too. But they really, really ramp that stuff up. Yeah. So so as you talk about your experience with Demon Souls, and so the PS5 Demon Souls is the only Souls game that you played to date, right?
That is correct. No, okay. I have not played any Dark Souls. Have not played Elden Ring. Have not played Bloodborne or Sekiro.
Okay, so this is what I wanted to ask you, and I think maybe you and I have had private conversations about it, but it's been a long time, so I'll ask you here on the show. When we were watching the PS5 reveal, and they ended that show with Demon Souls, and I was like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Yeah. And then you asked me well, what's the game I should get for PS5? I'm fucking Demon Souls, dummy. What are you doing?
So it's not just Spider-Man?
Yeah. So my question to you is, I honestly don't remember how much I tried to explain what the game is like, or maybe I didn't explain much about it at all. I honestly have no memory of it. But from playing it, go back to what it was like when you first played that game. What was your overall feeling with it? And then how did you, because I'm assuming this, but how did you stay the course versus having this game just abuse you?
Okay, I'm gonna try to explain this and not turn this into a 6-part episode. because it really is like it's like a core gaming memory for me now because it's happened. So you didn't actually explain much about the game at all, except that it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I was like, Brian, if it was a big deal, I think I would have heard of it.
That's so cool.
So I was like, but then I watched a trailer for the game and it showed the dragon boss, and I was like, well, this actually looks pretty cool, and I don't really have anything else to buy for it other than Spider-Man, so I'll go ahead and get this.
Yeah.
So then I do, and then I didn't play it at first. I was a little intimidated by it, but then I started, and I had a different friend who's not you tell me like, be really careful. The game is super hard,
Yeah.
and if you die, you lose like your soul. Then you have to go back and get it. And I remember at one point in the first level, I had like 80 souls, and I was like, I think they're called souls. Anyway,
Yeah, they
80
are.
of the. And I was like, oh my God. And then I died. And I was like, I just lost 80 souls. 80. 80.
That's so cute.
Oh my God. Yeah. And of course, like by the end of the game, you're carrying tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands at a time. So why did I stay the course? Well, first of all, because the reward for progression is so freaking fun.
Yeah.
Okay, that first level in Demon Souls, there's like a castle, and you're kind of moving through the castle.
Yep.
And then you get to the top, and you're in the ramparts area, and then you can go left or you can go right. And if you go right, there's like a knight who's guarding another, like a keep.
Yes.
And so if you can defeat the knight, you can get into the keep, and who knows what's in there. So that got a lot of my attention. But then if you go left, there's like other stuff to fight. And then the game rewards you by opening up shortcuts when you get up, so it's easier to get back to the place that you're at. So it doesn't feel quite as punishing that way. The real punishment is just is losing your souls.
It's by far the real punishment is that, and it's a perfect way for me to jump in with a cute story. Friend of the show, the Good Prince himself.
Yeah.
I smartened him up to Demon Souls in the PS3 era, and I was like, dude, you have to play this game. This game's so good, and he's objectively like good at video games.
Oh yeah, he is.
Like he has skills that you and I don't have,
Right.
Which is funny because he's definitely into games. Like that's probably the number one thing he does with his free time. But he's not like, he doesn't give a shit about like gaming culture or any of that. He doesn't give a shit about it. Like he's just like, give me a good game, I'm gonna play that bad boy, and that's all I need. So I let him borrow my copy of Demon Souls for PS3, and he's playing it, and his wife had to take it away from him because his fucking rage, because he would do what everyone does, and you feel like you're a hot shot, and you have all of a sudden your cute little 80 souls things.
Yeah.
Well, he's like running around with like 35,000 of these things, which so it's like he could level up like 15 times. But well, what's one more little area? What's one more little area? He dies, and then he's like, okay, well, I'm good at video games, so I'll just go ahead and get my souls back, and no big deal. And of course, that's not how it goes. So he throws like the biggest like cardiac event type rage thing, and his wife just goes, "No, we're done. You are not allowed to play this game." And he's like, "Well, what? Okay, I mean that's it. That's it for me. I can't do this anymore."
I love it that he was treated the way I treat my son with Fortnite.
Yeah, he had to.
Yeah,
it's just the way it was.
So when you get to the second level of that game. Remember, if you've never played a Souls game before, there's like these fog doors, and that leads you to the next part.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of figure all that out. Then I beat the first boss relatively easy by the time I got to him. The second phase of the game happens, and I was kind of going through it. And you're right, you start to get a little bit. I have this figured out. Like its difficulties overrode. And then I didn't feel like I was at the end of the level, but I saw a fog door, and I was like, "Well, I'll just see what's through this fog door, and then I'll go ahead and stop for the night, or I'll portal back so I can dump my souls or whatever, so I'm not at risk." And then I went through the fog door, and it was the boss, and I was carrying all these souls. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was 1,000 at the time by this point, second level.
Yeah, but early game it matters.
Definitely matters. Like 10 levels.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden there's a second boss, and it's this giant knight.
Yeah.
And the gimmick is supposed to be that you like whack the knight's ankle, and then he falls over, and then you can whack its head to do real damage. I wasn't looking up spoilers or anything, so I didn't know that was the gimmick of the fight. So instead, I was just trying to I was shooting arrows to just tink its head from far away. I timed this. It was like 55 minutes that I was fighting this boss.
Yeah.
Using up, and I had all these potions, and using up everything. And then finally I got it down. And then this was the last time that this had happened, but on the PS5, you can record your own audio.
Yeah.
And when you get trophies.
Oh boy.
And it was the last time that I didn't record my audio because the default is set to off.
Yeah.
And then I discovered that, and then since then, I let out such a primal scream when I finally got this guy down after 55 minutes. I wish that it had been recorded by the PS5, and it unfortunately wasn't, or else it'd be part of our show intro.
Sure.
But it was like such a moment because, again, like it was just the most epic adventure. It's like Frodo and Mountain Dew. It's all of that stuff.
Yeah, of course.
And then once I got him down, so now I get his souls as well. So I'm like, oh, waltzing back into the Soul Keeper or whatever. It's like, give me my 10 levels. I am now a god.
Right.
And then I went to the 3rd level and died almost
immediately
instantly.
crushed. Yeah. That's the Souls recipe difference is that it's like you think you've got it all figured out, and then there's a hurdle that's thrown at you that drops you back down to reality, and navigating that and juggling that again and again and again is really the appeal. I do see why some people don't like that in the same regard where, like, I understand why people don't like, I don't like RTSs because of the way that the way that it's stressful. But I love horror stuff because I do love the way that that's stressful. So it's like you kind of have to find your particular flavor of stress and what works for you. So. Yeah.
And then for us too, again, when we talk about this, when the Venn diagram aligns for you and I, it doesn't happen often, but it happens at least with Demon Souls. I'm sure it'll happen with Elden Ring as well.
I know it will. I know.
Yeah, that is the kind of stress that we both like.
Yeah.
So that's good. And also, when I assume you're going to say this, when you're going through those games and you find a secret passage or something that's like, and you're going down it, that just feels so cool when you're doing it. It's like, what is down here? I was going this way, but now I discovered this thing. Where's this going to lead me to? It really, like, you are just so engaged in the game while you're playing through it. I'm sure that's what they intended, but it so 100% works. It's great.
The sense of discovery in these games is like, they absolutely nail it. Better than anyone in the business today, in my opinion.
Yeah.
As we wind down here, I'm going to say I give it my highest recommendation to anyone listening, and obviously you as well, to play Elden Ring. That just needs to be said again.
Even before Paper Mario?
Yes, I'll say that. I will go on record and say you should play this before you play Paper Mario.
I cannot believe this endorsement that you're giving.
It's the truth, and I'd be lying through my teeth if I didn't say it. So this is the best game in my opinion, Elden Ring and the DLC. If you look at it, if you examine the whole thing as a bundle, it is the best video game that you can currently play, bar any. And that is I'm stamping that. I'm putting that out there, and I'm saying that.
Best Souls game, best From Software game,
best video game.
I did play Armored Core 6, so I've played multiple.
You played some hard shit, yeah.
Well, okay. I don't have anything to add to that because that's just like the highest possible praise. Everybody watching should be running. I'm getting Elden Ring after.
Well, what's funny too is, and as we so you look at what the scope of video games today, and you look at the influence that the Souls games have had on so much shit, not just mainstream big games like Neo. But like indie games, like there isn't an area of games that hasn't been influenced by Souls stuff. It's to the point where like I can personally like put it up there with a Zelda or a Mario in terms of how much influence it's put out there.
I've seen it a lot. The Hollow Knight, right, has like some Soul stuff in it. Tunic, which is a game that has no business having Souls like. It's a wonderful indie game, but they just it's like a Souls like component glommed onto that. And I just use those two examples because those are two games that don't lend themselves to Souls-like mechanics by default. But the Souls influence has been so pervasive that you still see it on games where you wouldn't otherwise expect to see it.
So it is not hyperbolic to say that, like, for me and my money and how I like my video games played, like I think the whole Souls series, which has really culminated into like their best work, is Elden Ring. And it's been this wonderful roller coaster ride along the way that I have never gotten off, and I have no plans on getting off this ride anytime soon. But it is, when I look at modern games and like what has interested me the most and what's like really captivated me, it's this shit. It's like this to me today is like what Street Fighter was in the early 90s for me and like my tastes. So, I mean, fucking just quit the shit. Quit the shit, you, and start playing this stuff if you haven't. But almost certainly, anyone watching this show is probably playing Elden Ring.
I will not miss a FromSoft Souls-like launch day event again. even if, which is probably going to be the case, the third Horizon game comes out
You can set your watch
when
to it.
Elden Ring 2 comes out the same day. I will choose to play Elden Ring.
It might happen. It might happen. Okay, is there anything you want to say in closing on this stuff?
No, except that once I actually get through Elden Ring, we'll do an episode where with Robbie reacts and say, "Oh, you finally did it! Tell us all about it." So look forward to that in the future.
I rub my hands together with anticipation.
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't said this yet, so I'll say it now. Like, subscribe, leave comments. We're on Spotify if that's your deal. You can listen to us in the car on the way to Arby's, and man, do I recommend you do that. So until next time, thank you so much for watching.